Well, 3 out of 4 law professors say Donald Trump should be impeached. And the 4th says Donald Trump should not be impeached yet. The dissenting law professor at today's hearing, Jonathan Turley, did not actually defend Donald Trump's actions that are currently under investigation. Professor Turley simply argued that the House of Representatives should slow down and spend months fighting in courts to force the testimony of Trump officials who are refusing to testify. And after that, then maybe Donald Trump should be impeached.
Impeachments require a certain period of saturation and maturation. That is, the public has to catch up. I'm not prejudging what your record would show, but if you rush this impeachment, you're going to leave half the country behind. And certainly that's not what the framers wanted. You have to give the time to build a record.
The 3 other law professors testifying today, Noah Feldman, Pamela Karlan, and Michael Gerhardt, agreed that the president's unprecedented order to not testify issued to everyone in his administration is in and of itself an impeachable offense as obstruction of Congress. Jonathan Turley did not disagree that it could be an impeachable offense. He just suggested that the Democrats need to spend months in court fighting the president over those witnesses before writing that up as an obstruction article of impeachment. Harvard Law professor Noah Feldman said that he did not support impeachment efforts against the president until he read the call record of Donald Trump's phone call with the president of Ukraine, in which Donald Trump asked the president of Ukraine to announce an investigation of Joe Biden.
I'd like to focus the panel on the evidence they considered and the findings in the Intelligence Committee report that the president solicited the interference of a foreign government, Ukraine, in the 2020 U.S. presidential election. Professor Feldman, did President Trump commit the impeachable high crime and misdemeanor of abuse of power based on that evidence and those findings?
Based on that evidence and those findings, the president did commit an impeachable abuse of office.
Professor Karlan, same question.
Same answer.
And Professor Gerhardt, did President Trump commit the impeachable high crime and misdemeanor of abuse of power?
We 3 are unanimous. Yes.
The 3 law professors supporting impeachment now repeatedly cited specific points of evidence in making their case. Jonathan Turley never cited evidence in his repeated urging that Congress slow down in its gathering of evidence. Stanford law professor Pamela Karlan went out of her way to cite what she thought was the single most damning line of testimony in the impeachment inquiry.
I spent all of Thanksgiving vacation sitting there reading these transcripts. I ate like a turkey that came to us in the mail that was already cooked because I was spending my time doing this. And the most chilling line for me of the entire process was the following. Ambassador Sondland said he had to announce the investigations. He's talking about President Zelensky. He had to announce the investigations. He didn't actually have to do them, as I understood it. And then he said, I never heard, Mr. Goldman, anyone say that the investigations had to start or had to be completed. The only thing I heard from Mr. Giuliani or otherwise was they had to be announced in some form. And what I took that to mean was this was not about whether Vice President Biden actually committed corruption or not. This was about injuring somebody who the president thinks of as a particularly hard opponent.
No Republican in the room responded in any way to that point raised by Professor Karlan. Jonathan Turley did not say one word about it. All of the Republicans on the committee pretended that Donald Trump withheld $400 million in military aid to Ukraine while he was properly evaluating Ukraine's fitness to receive such aid. Every Republican in the room knows they are all lying about that. They all know that the Defense Department certified Ukraine's suitability for such aid before Donald Trump blocked it. Every Republican in the room pretended that in the end, Donald Trump decided to send the aid to Ukraine, even though Ukraine did not publicly announce an investigation of Joe Biden, and therefore Donald Trump did nothing wrong. Every Republican in the room knows that they are lying about that. Every Republican in the room knows that Donald Trump only only released the aid to Ukraine when the Democrats in the House of Representatives started investigating why Donald Trump was holding up that aid. And every Republican in the room knows that Donald Trump was warned about a whistleblower complaint about this before he released the aid to Ukraine. In other words, everyone in that room, Democrat and Republican, knows that Donald Trump released the aid to Ukraine only because he got caught in the act of illegally withholding it.
Does it matter? I'll ask all the panelists. Does it matter to impeachment that the $391 million, U.S. taxpayer dollars, in military assistance that the president withheld was ultimately delivered? Professor Feldman, does that matter to the question of impeachment?
No, it does not. If the President of the United States attempts to abuse his office, that is a complete impeachable offense. The possibility that the President might get caught in the process of attempting to abuse his office and then not be able to pull it off does not undercut in any way the impeachability of the act. If you'll pardon a comparison, President Nixon was subject to articles of impeachment preferred by this committee for attempting to cover up the Watergate break-in. The fact that President Nixon was not ultimately successful in covering up the break-in was not grounds for not impeaching him. The attempt itself is the impeachable act.
Soliciting itself is the impeachable offense, regardless whether the other person comes up with it. So imagine that the president had said, "Will you do us a favor? Will you investigate Joe Biden?" And the president of Ukraine said, "You know what? No, I won't, because we've already looked into this and it's totally baseless." The president would still have committed an impeachable act, even if he had been refused right there on the phone.
One of the things to understand from the history of impeachment is everybody who's impeached has failed. They failed to get what they wanted. And what they wanted was not just to do what they did, but to get away with it. And the point of impeachment is, it's made possible through investigation, is to catch that person, charge that person, and ultimately remove that person from office. But impeachments are always focusing on somebody who didn't quite get as far as they wanted to.
Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.